Mm, okay, so I think this video is going to be very bold. But, being bold has never deterred me from saying something interesting. Also, I'm not wearing black for the first time. How about that? That's awesome, right? That means I'm changing, right? Because I'm not wearing black, I'm not changing. Uh, okay, so I've been reading Hegel, and I've been trying to think pragmatically about relationships themselves. Um, and of course, when you read Hegel, everything is about absolute knowing to that extent. Now, just to kind of put a preface in here, obviously, I have not finished reading the Phenomenology of Spirit. However, as I'm working through the first chapter on consciousness, I couldn't help but think that obviously the whole point, well, at least not the whole point, but how Hegel keeps coming back to this idea of consciousness being in and for itself. And I was thinking about human relationships, obviously, and I came to this weird conclusion. Well, not conclusion, but I came upon this interesting philosophical idea about absolute solitude. And what is absolute solitude? Well, absolute solitude is the idea that you realize as a as a as an individual, and this is going to get very complicated because I'm going to do like this big Hegelian circle with this. It's going to get very complicated. Okay, so I'm going to try to explain this. It's still a very fresh idea for me, and I hope you guys give me slack and maybe correct me wherever. But I'm just trying to play with this concept, just to show my playfulness with this concept. Okay, so absolute solitude. Absolute solitude is when the individual realizes that the relationships themselves are not separate from them. Just to give an example, when I talk about my relationship with my father, when I talk about my relationship with my mother, friends, family, anything, any type of relationship that you refer to as an other, you are already positing that it is separate from you. Why? And I know because I was thinking about this more. I was like, why would I think that these relationships themselves are separate from me? Well, it's from the very fact that I fear losing them. I fear losing them. I fear the relationships themselves being lost. And I came to the conclusion that if we fear the relationships themselves being lost, that means the relationship to my mother, the relationship to my father, so on. If I fear the relationship being lost, then I'm already positing that these relationships are separate from me because of the very fact that they can be lost. If they couldn't be lost, then they wouldn't be separate from me. They wouldn't have some type of uh, detachable feeling. I don't know how to express that part. And interesting enough, I put the idea dating the absolute. Dating the absolute is this idea that I was thinking about where, because I know in Hegel it's all about, this absolute knowing, reaching absolute knowing. And definitely this idea of absolute solitude is really not separate from absolute knowing in any kind of way. But I like putting absolute solitude because it really shows it, for me at least, it really shows a tangible, real experience of my relationships with other people. And if I embrace this idea of absolute solitude, what it really is that these relationships are not outside of me. Everything is in and for itself, right? So that means my relationship to my mother, the relationship that I have with my mother, is really everything that happens within that relationship, whatever it may be, um, is in and for itself for me as a person. Okay. Now, the thing that's painful about relationships, any relation, right? Any to your brother, your sister, your cousins, family members, friends, anybody. What's painful about the relationships is in real time, you acknowledge, you experience the notion. You experience the notion, which is painful until you find another way to correct that error and match it up. And so this would be matching up the notion with the object, the way Hegel talks about in the beginning of the forward. Yes, it's the forward. Or is it the introduction? No, it's the forward. um, but anyways, the reason why I put dating the absolute is because I found it really funny that actually that's all you're ever doing. You're dating the absolute. All your relationships with other people in the very broad context is you're dating the absolute. You're dating truth. You're having a relationship with truth. The thing is that truth, you don't really know. You don't know that it is true, or every moment kind of supersedes the other. And the interesting thing about human experience is that this every time the moment supersedes the other with human relationships, it is painful. So it's actually painful to realize in human experience the notion. The notion itself, as Hegel talks about, it is actually painful as a human being to experience the notion. That's why I actually conceptualize this idea of dating the absolute, because what it alludes to is dating the absolute in its suffering is that it allows you to correct the error. Um, the real question is, how do we correct the error and reach something that will be a new truth until we experience pain again? And for me, this is just like any relationship. I mean, honestly, the fact that you know I'm in a relation, if I'm in a brother relationship with my sibling, there's always something that's going to happen that's going to shatter that the truth of that relationship, the truth of that relationship over and over again. Um, but the thing is, so now that you guys kind of understand what it means when I talk about dating the absolute, with this kind of collision of notion and object, matching notion and object together, is that now what does it mean to have absolute solitude? Well, reaching absolute solitude is probably on the same basis as absolute knowing. However, the way I look at absolute solitude is that you realize, and I already said this already, is that you realize that you realize that all the relationships that you have are not ever external to you, because they are always through you and for you, meaning that it is always through the other that it is for you. And when you realize this, uh, and you cultivate this, then you slowly master the idea of reaching absolute solitude. Um, and so I like this idea of absolute solitude, because what happens is you're not like some hermit in the cave meditating and so on. No, you can actually have real solitude in real time with people, and always have that solitude around you, because the only relationship that exists is the absolute solitude itself. So there's only ever one relationship. And that's why I put like in a very Hegelian way. I feel like it's a very Hegelian way. There's only one relationship, really. Um, but it is necessary that we have human relationships, because that is the only way that we can reach absolute solitude. Um, I wish I I wish I could explain more this idea of absolute solitude, where you know you could say it's where absolute solitude is this very weird way of expressing it, but I feel like absolute solitude is where you realize that not only you can be in the other's language, and I think me saying that is a little bit complex. Being in the other's language, being in the other's language is being in the language for yourself. Oh, that's I know that's really hard, and I don't even know what I'm saying at that point, because it's so circular. But there's something there. I think there's something there, and I like this idea of dating the absolute, because then it really shows that uh, coming across notions are really painful. Then, like, it's truly painful. It is the human experience of being unsatisfied, of being um, suffering. Really, it's suffering. And even if we're not causing the suffering, it's this realization, right, that when I encounter my father as the notion, and he proves himself not to be true, that it is painful. And then how do we take this painful notions and match them up towards something? But I think what I started thinking, or how I started realizing this, is that Hegel alludes in the beginning about various types of responses. And one is about the fear for error. But he says sometimes the fear of error is actually the fear of truth. And I think that is actually true when it comes to coming across a painful notion. And you see this in relationships all the time, where it's like, oh, I don't want to be hurt again. Love always hurts me. And so actually what that would mean is that you are also you are also afraid of truth and love. And so then you get stuck in the drama of dating the absolute. You get stagnant in it. Um, so I guess that if I were to summarize it, I'm gonna try to write this. I think that's the difficult part. I'm gonna try to write this idea, um, And it's so difficult. And I'll share with you guys the line that it kind of really hit me. It's in the chapter of consciousness. It's where Hegel is talking about understanding and the forces. And there's this one line. It's on paragraph 146, and I have it highlighted. And he says here, it says, the inner world is, for consciousness, still a pure beyond, because consciousness does not as yet find itself in it. Okay, so that's the whole point of me bringing up absolute solitude. So just reverse the words, right? He's saying that the inner world is for consciousness. Absolute solitude is this inner world that is for us. Now, the thing is, we do find it as still something very beyond us, whether we explicitly know this or implicitly know this. But we can't find ourselves in it yet, right? So that's why we're so. That's why we need the other. That's why we need. I need the relationship of my father. I need the relationship of my mother, and so on and so on. Uh, because I have not yet found myself in it, like in it myself, inside myself. Um, and it's only through the painful notions that I'll put the notions of the other that forces me to go back into myself. The problem is that this can result into loneliness. Loneliness would be that you have stopped. Um, you choose to stagnate yourself at the notion, at the error. Basically, loneliness is the fear of the error. Um, because I am still imagining myself as empty, I think. Ugh. Okay. That scratch that last part. Just I think we can stop there. There's still a lot to work out in here. Um, but I might even have to rewatch this video myself because I'm still trying to think through this and it's kind of difficult, you know. I catch myself doing this and this and this, and I'm like, oh no, oh yeah, that's really smart. And I'm like, oh no, I'm an idiot. Oh yeah, that's genius. And it's like, oh yeah, no, I'm an idiot. I'm both, you know. Okay. uh, anyways, really, just tell me what you guys think. I think it's a really fascinating idea, and it ties in with everything that I've been thinking about. You know, dating, relationships. What does it mean to have a human relationship? This is great for me. For me, this is just so great. This is so fun to think in this way, and I'm interested to see what more I can come up with about this idea of absolute solitude, dating the absolute, and how notions themselves are truly painful. It's not just something that you're like, oh, uh, I don't want this to be so detached where it's like you're learning something in a book and you're like, oh, I guess it's not true, and then you proceed to come across another truth and so on. Uh, no, when it comes to actual human relationships, the notion is extremely painful. When you realize it's a notion, when you finally realize it's a notion, it's truly painful. Like truly painful. Okay. I think I think that's it. All right, guys, take care.